All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. Been a couple of days, I guess, since I've put out a video, so I'm trying to finish this project up, but boy, every time I make changes into it, it comes back and I can get it to compile, I can get it to run, but it doesn't do very much when it runs. So in other words, it's supposed to be showing here, since I chose hourly, hours worked and hourly rate. You can see it's not. And if I do put something in there, I put in, for example, 50 and 20, and I click Add a Record, nothing happens. Can show the other form. That's really not much. So I'm going to go and start to make a bunch of changes, I guess. One thing I wanted to check real quick. Yep, when you look here, this isn't lined up with the rest of them. There we go. Lock them back up. There it is. All right. One thing I wanted to do, and I've started to do this, and that is to come in there and remember back in the olden days when I had this validation library, I had in there to check for something being an integer. I had to check for something, being within a certain range, etc. And I decided I wanted to try to put this into the program. So at the top of this program, if I can get back to it, you'll notice amongst other things, I now have there, not that, because there's the validation library. All right, but if I go back to my employee manager, let's just save what we have, and let's go back up to the top. You'll notice I now have using validation library. Okay, that's a start. All right. All right, so we're going to go do some massive rewrite. So again, these are my global variables, global to this class. All right, we've got an employee type, which as it says is the type of employee. All right, hourly, piece worker, commissioner, salaried. We've got this service layer. We added this service class that we're going to look at in just a minute. We've got a binding source. Notice what it says. The binding source is a bridge. It's a go-between between the user interface and the actual data in the database. All right. We want access to the current employee, which could possibly be null, and that's why there's a question mark in here. All right. Now, before we go on and take a look, there's a couple things I have changed, and I want to show them to you. I want to go back into my models, and I'm going to show you each model. First thing that I added in here to the employee class was this. All employees do get a gross pay, and they'll get it by calling calculate gross pay. All right, so all of them will do that. So that was added in there. That was added to my employee.cs file. For the hourly employee, we didn't have to add anything. All right, there's our gross pay. Remember, if the employee is not working any overtime, it's just hours worked times hourly rate. If they have overtime coming, it's 40 times the hourly rate. That's their straight time, plus whatever hours they worked over 40 times the hourly rate times the overtime rate of 1.5 or time and a half. Then next, we had our piece worker employee. All right, well, let's go back to hourly because I wanted to show you something that was in here. I did go back in and added some what are called data annotations. What does that mean? Well, notice we said that the range for hours worked should be between 0 and 84. And if you don't have the number within there, it should give you that error message. So we're not allowing bad data to go into the database. Hourly rate must be between 0 and 99.99. These are values that we came up with earlier. All right, so let's close that one. And then let's look at the piece worker. Again, the pieces made must be between 0 and 100. And the price per piece must be between a penny and $1. Again, these are arbitrary values I came up with. And our calculate gross pay, which is just pieces made times price per piece. All right, so we've got those two. Let's take a look at our commission employee. And then a second, the salaried employee, but first the commission. Again, we put a range in there. We put in data annotations that say that it's got to be, the percentage must be between 0 and 0.3%, and the sales amount. Now that I'm looking at that, I don't remember the way that I set it up, but I thought I had sales amount first, then percentage. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to flip these. All right. So the sales amount must be between 0 and 100,000, and the commission must be between 0 and 30%. And again, the calculating the gross pay rather is just the percentage times the sales amount. So, and finally we've got salary, which is the simplest. The range again between 0 and 100,000 must be in there, and we just return it. There's no calculation to be done. Now, when I do all those, let me just go back to any one. It doesn't matter. I'll go back to the hourly. You'll notice I have to add this. System.componentModel.data annotations. All right, so that stuff has now all been added. Now, what I should do, and I did do it previously, but I just moved something around, and that is when we made changes in here, I'm going to go back into my NuGet package manager. And the other thing I didn't like is I had all these errors, all these things that were in there. If you remember, there were just lots. These aren't errors, they're warnings, but I had all these warnings. So I went back in and went into the, under my data, to the DB context file. I think it was this one. And changed this around, changed the precision around. 99.99. All right. Notice we made it 5.2, which means 5 total places, 2 after the decimal. Same thing for our, hourly rate and hours worked. Then for the piece worker, 4.2, because $1 was the maximum. So we cut this way down. These were really high before. The commission percentage, 3.2. All right. And the sales amount, 10.2, because it can go up to $100,000 for the sales amount, and the same thing for the salary. Now, what that did, just so you see this, if I come back up here and I'm going to do an add migration, oops, you don't have to, you can do it all in lowercase, I think it won't matter, migration, and I'm going to put in here swapped positions for commission employee. I don't think, that's all we did, so I don't think it should build without a problem. And after it does that, we have to say update database. But I want you to notice something when we've done this. All those errors that we were getting before have now been replaced by one error. An operation was scaffolded that may result in a loss of data. So there's still one in there that it didn't like, but I knocked it down from all these to just one. All right, which I think is much better. All right. The next thing I'm going to do in here then is I'm going to make this a lot smaller and get rid of this. That was the migration file. We don't need DB context. Well, we might look at the services later. I don't know, but let's just look at Employee Manager. So the next thing that we had in here were our constructors. All right. So the first thing we have to put in here, this sets everything up for us, this initialize component. So that was the first thing. All right. And after we did that, we wanted to configure the data grid view. So we're only going to have a single row. Now, we could, again, just put this on another line. It doesn't matter to this, okay? But we're saying the selection mode is full row select, but multi-select is false, and read-only is true. All right, the grid itself is read-only. All right, but we're going to be manipulating it through code. All right. Now, then notice the next thing that we're doing after that. We're initializing our service layer. So we're making the service available to us. Why? Because if we go over to our services folder here and we bring up EmployeeService.cs, we'll look at this file in more depth later because I've changed it again. But this is what we have in here. So we're going to be able to get our employees. We're going to be able to add an employee. We're going to be able to update an employee. And we're going to be able to delete an employee. These are what we're doing through the services themselves. So that's making it available to us. All right. The last thing, we just have this employee type in here, which we set equal to double quote, double quote. So that means if this gets called with nothing passed in, the employee type will be set to the empty set, nothing. Now, this is the one that should be called 100% of the time. And what this says is, hey, if you have to, really call the other constructor first, so that's going to do all this stuff, but then the employee type is going to be set to whatever type we passed in, and that type that we are passing in is whatever we chose in our FRM new startup. It's whatever was in here. So it's the word hourly, or the word commission, or the word piecework, worker, I guess, or the word salaried. All right. Okay. All right. The next we've got our, what else? Am I missing anything else here? Oh, we're also calling load employees here. And what is that doing? All right. This will load our initial data. Okay. All right. So what are we doing in here? What are we doing in load employees? Well, I made some changes to it, and the whole thing is right here. Okay. As it says here, it's designed to load the data. All right. So the first thing we're doing in here in our load data is, well, maybe this is where I'm going to start to remove stuff and just rewrite it on the fly here. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to take everything that's in here now and I'm going to comment it out. Why? In case there's something in there I can use. All right. And don't worry if it gives me errors or anything else in here. That's totally fine. All right. I'm at 13 minutes, so I'm doing good for time. I'd like to at least write this one, get this one done, and then if we have to, we'll just go on to the next tape. So the first thing I want to do here, where am I? All right, starting up at the top here. All right, I want to bind the data grid view to the binding source. So it's DGV employee dot data source equals underscore binding source. And then we're calling load employees. So now that I look at this, first of all, I should have a semicolon at the end, not a period. All right. And we've got our load employees. And now that I look at that, that's not this. Let me start over again. Okay. What am I talking about? All right. I'm working off some notes that I made. And what I want to do here is I want to come down. I want to start doing things in the order in which they're kind of happening, for lack of better words. Okay, so let me go up to the top. And I want to change around my load event here. Don't worry if I get any errors, because they're going to be fixed momentarily. All right, so going back up to the top here, or near the top. All right, that load employees I'm not going to worry about right now, but I am going to copy this in. All right, because I'm going to put load up here up at the top, where I think at least it belongs. So again, that was what I wanted to say here. And that was to bind the data grid view to the binding source, and then I want to call load employees. All right. Okay, next, I want to come in and let's rewrite that load employees then. I don't think I need any of this stuff in here. So again, I'm going to, rather than removing it, I'm going to comment it out. All right, so here's our load employees. Get rid of this that we had in there before. All right. Let's go back down to here and let's look at what we have in here. Maybe I can use some, most, all of this. We'll find out in a second. All right. So I'm coming in here. If string.isNull or empty employee type, what does that mean? That means we haven't chosen an employee type. So we'll just return. Now, one thing I've added in here is a generic routine that's called showMessage, to which I can add a message, how about you must choose an employee type, and we'll say in here, no employee type chosen. Because, all right, if there isn't any employee type, if we didn't choose anything, there's nothing to do because we don't know what kind of employee we're working with. All right? So that should make sense. So we just want to get the heck out of there. All right. Next, we want to come in and we want to try to retrieve employees of the current type from the service. So in other words, and I want to make sure you understand this, in other words, if I put hourly in there, I want hourly employees. If I chose hourly, if I choose piece worker, I want all the piece worker employees, etc. And it's not retrieve, it's retrieve. All right. So var employees equals underscore service dot get employees of that employee type. Now, hopefully that makes sense with what I just explained to you. All right, then next, I want to set the binding source data source. So underscore binding source dot data source equal employees. All right. and I don't want to reset anything, so underscore binding source dot reset bindings. I want that to be false. Notice what it says. Causes a control bound to a binding source to reread all the items in the list and refresh their displayed values. We have no reason to do that. All right. Kind of what I had already done here, but that's okay. Changed it around a little bit. So let's get rid of these lines. All right, next. If there are employees, we want to select the first one because we have to update the labels. All right. And the gross pay. So if underscore binding source dot count is greater than 0, all right, what this will do, for lack of better words here, this will ensure that the selected employee is not null, which is what we'd want. So we're setting the position to 0, all right, and the row selected is true. And this, we're calling the selected change because we are making a change, for lack of better words. Otherwise, so else, we'll just clear all the employee fields. So we will clear all fields if there are no employees. And I don't think I've written that yet, so if we get an error here, don't worry about it. So clear employee fields. Now it's giving us an error, so let's write that. All right. Again, I'm looking through my notes here, and all that's going to do is it's just going to clear all the text boxes and so let's just do it. So private void clear employee fields. All right, so we've got what? txt first name dot text is equal to nothing. Txt last name dot text is equal to nothing. Txt, we called it text, just text box 1 dot text is equal to nothing. Txt text box 2 dot text is equal to nothing. So that'll clear out all of our text boxes. So again, I want to make sure you have at least somewhat of an understanding of what's going on here. All right, that will clear out then this text box, this one, and this one. Probably should do gross pay too. And I might as well do these two labels. All right, so, oops. Back into my code. So, LBL was label 1.text is equal to nothing. And LBL label 2.text is equal to nothing. Okay, so those have both been fixed. The only other thing that I've missed, I think, is, again, I didn't do the txt gross pay. .text is equal to nothing. That literally is clearing out, going back to this, that will clear out, where are we? This, and this. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 text boxes and 2 labels that we should be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 text boxes and 2 labels. All right. So I'm going to stop right here because I'm at 25 minutes. But we're going to come back and we're going to rewrite the add record, the update record, and if necessary, the delete record. See if we can get this thing to work. I'll be back hopefully today.